I'm Teresa Lyson with NICC Business and Community Solutions. Today's topic in our instructor webinar series is From Friction to Freedom, When Working Harder Stops Working with Sheri Z. Sheri is a speaker, coach, and consultant and the founder of the Dash Mindset. After more than 20 years leading cross-functional teams in the corporate environment, Sheri now partners with organizations to help professionals navigate the human side of work, including communication, self-awareness, leadership, and working effectively with others. Her sessions help individuals and teams better understand themselves and the people around them so they can reduce friction, strengthen relationships, and work together more effectively. Sheri's programs are practical, engaging, and conversation-driven, giving participants tools they can immediately apply in their day-to-day work. In addition to her speaking and consulting work, Sheri instructs a graduate leadership course at Mount Mercy University, and she hosts the Dash Mindset podcast. She brings real-world leadership experience, curiosity, and humor to every session, helping people think differently about the challenges they experience at work and how to move forward. If you have any questions or comments throughout today's presentation, please add them to the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and we will save time at the end of the webinar to answer those questions. So with that, Sheri, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Teresa. So thank you, Teresa, for having me, and for Sarah having me. And thank you to everyone for being here. This is going to be 30 minutes, so I'm going to move forward. But like Teresa said, I'll take questions at the end and would love to stay as long as you want me to. So today we're going to talk about hard work. And something to keep in mind is that hard work in itself is not a problem. It's problematic when it becomes our default, which it often does, because we know that, figuring things out is a good thing. We're taught that working hard is a good thing. It's an expectation in a lot of cases, right? It's not a bad thing, but today we're going to talk about what to do when it becomes our default, because when we are in a position that is challenging in some way, that's when we typically go to working hard. We go to our default. So oftentimes, because it's our default, when someone says something to us like, just work less, it's not that big of a deal. That's not helpful, because we operate on our default, right? It's kind of like if someone were to say to you, if you were overwhelmed or anxious or worried about something, and someone were to say, calm down. Has that ever happened to anybody? I know if you raise your hand, I can't actually see you, but raise your hand anyway. That is not helpful. And that has happened to me before. I know when I've been maybe in a state of overwhelm and someone tells me to calm down, and I just want to say, wow, that's brilliant. Thank you for those wise words, because I had not considered that, right? So if this has ever happened to you, you're not alone. And so if someone has ever told you, just try, don't care as much or work fewer hours, again, you're not alone. It's not something we just do because we're human and we're operating on default. So if it were simple, we'd all be doing it, right? So today we're going to talk about understanding why we operate that way. I'm not going to tell you just work fewer hours, try less, take a vacation day, because I know how unhelpful that is. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So I would love for you to respond in the chat by answering this question. When do you go into work harder mode? And your immediate response to that might be, I'm always in work harder mode, so I'm not even sure how to respond to that, because I'm never not in it, right? I would love to know, in what cases do you work harder? And maybe it's just all the time. What is going on in your world when your brain is telling you, you need to do more. You need to work over the weekend. You need to just get it done, power through. When I have deadlines to meet, when I've procrastinated daunting tasks and all of a sudden the due date is looming, pressure of deadlines. Oh my God, it's so funny, isn't it? I mean, it's not like we ever don't have deadlines generally, right? And sometimes when I think about deadlines, I think about, the fact that this week is my kid's last week of school. And I always feel like it's so sudden. They've been in school since August, but all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we have these deadlines and all these things. When my to-do list is very long and deadlines are approaching, a larger project that requires focus, deadlines, feeling behind, mostly when I have a lot of tasks in my to-do list or when I see a huge pile of documents on my desk. Oh, I hate the documents, right, on your desk. Deadlines approaching. When goals are clear, oh, that's great when they're clear. Okay. Most of the time, except when something does come up, I kick into higher gear. So much to do. When I feel behind, which seems like daily, weekly. I also work harder when a tangible result is within reach. Oh, that's great. Kind of like when you can see the finish line. When I'm feeling overwhelmed and deadlines are near, or piling up, when everything is on the list and urgent at the same time. Okay, so I would love for you to really recognize that other people are saying a lot of the same things, right? So you're not alone. Sometimes we feel like we're alone in this, but turns out none of us is. And I would love to know if you ever feel like you're not behind. I'd love to know what that feels like, because I think as humans, we just generally feel like we're behind all the time. Okay. So here's what I would like for you to think about. Oftentimes, when there is a difference between what we think should be and what is, that's when we're in a state where we feel like we need to do more. We need to work harder. So there's a difference between the deadline and where we are with the deadline, for instance, right? A lot of you talked about deadlines. We feel like we are behind and we shouldn't be behind. So what is we're behind. We don't think we should be. So that gap between what we think should be and what is what I like to call friction. And we don't like friction. Friction is uncomfortable. Sometimes it's friction within ourselves. Sometimes it's with other people. Sometimes it's friction between, it's external friction, right? The difference between us and the deadline, or where we are and the deadline. So that's what I refer to as friction when I talk about going from friction to freedom. And so some examples of this I have here. So what we think should be, one example would be, I should have this figured out. Anyone ever feel like that? Like we just should have everything figured out, right? Um, what is I don't have it figured out. A lot of times we just don't. And then what working harder might look like in that scenario, because we want to get rid of that difference, is overthinking, over preparing, researching more, maybe getting another certification, making it perfect, as if perfect is actually attainable. Another example would be, I should be able to keep everyone happy. Anyone, a people pleaser out there? What's true is that people have competing needs. It's not actually possible to make everyone happy. Yet we want to reduce that friction that we're experiencing. So we try to make it work for everyone, even when it doesn't actually work for us. Another example might be, they should have gotten it done. So they might be your spouse, your kids, a colleague, whomever. They should have gotten it done. And what's true is that they didn't. So there's a friction between the two. And what we tend to do is remind them, check in, and a lot of times we just end up doing it ourselves. So these are just a few examples. And it's all action oriented. So that's what I really want you to see out of this. It's all action oriented. And that's what we do. It's working harder in some capacity. We do more in some capacity in order to reduce that friction. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So when friction shows up, we have a tendency to do these things. Sorry, I'm flipping between two different things here. So bear with me. I will get on board here in a second. Okay, so here are some examples. When friction shows up, we tend to add more. We tend to do more. So we might add more effort, control, explaining, fixing, proving, all of these things. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but these all end in, most of these end in ing. They're mostly verbs, right? These are actions that we take. And that's when friction tends to show up, what we tend to do. And oftentimes we don't even realize we're doing it. Okay, what I'd love for you to ask yourself is, does it actually reduce the friction when you're taking more action, when you're adding more? And oftentimes we just don't stop to ask that question. Does it actually reduce the friction? It might feel like it does in the moment. And another question is it actually serving you? And is it serving others? Oftentimes we don't stop to think the impact it's having on other people. We're so focused on the compulsion that we have to do more, to take more action, that we don't necessarily think about what the impact is to ourselves or to other people. We just know that we're striving to do it. So here's my story. And I could talk to you for several hours about my story, which I won't. But I'll just take an excerpt. So one particularly memorable story that arises for me when I think about my own journey, my own career, is that I was in my therapist's office once. And I was telling him, as I often did, how I just felt behind. I just kind of had this blanket of anxiety about me since I think I came out of the womb, probably. And I remember telling him that I just wished that I could go to bed early at night, that I didn't have to stay up to do one more thing. And I said, I just have this never ending to-do list. And I said, I just wish that I could get it done. I feel like it's never going to get done. And I remember him looking at me and saying, then go to bed. And I remember in that moment thinking, well, I clearly need to get a different therapist because this guy doesn't get it, right? I mean, he's not solving my problem. He's just telling me to go to bed. And truly that would have been in my best interest, but it was not what I typically did. It wasn't my pattern and it felt super uncomfortable. And he wasn't solving my problem. My problem in my mind was that I needed to get my to-do list done, right? So the thing was that even though I was capable and I was well-intentioned and I thought, oh, somebody should be able to help me figure out how to get this to-do list done, I was still human. And we're all human. If you're here today, unless you're, a chat GPT note taker or something, you're human. And so even though I knew that at a cognitive level, something within me always thought that I should be able to figure everything out. I should be able to get everything done. And I should just be able to do it all. And so the fact that he was telling me just to go to bed just seemed ridiculous in my mind. So I felt like, and I really I love visuals. So when this hit me one day, I thought, oh, this is something I want to share with other people. What I was actually doing was trying to chase the horizon. I was trying to reach some state of perfection, some state of everything being done. But it's kind of like if you were to chase the horizon, you're never actually going to reach the horizon. So I understood what my therapist was saying. He was saying, okay, you're never going to reach it. So just go to bed, right? But that just was not even acceptable in my mind. It wasn't something that was, a possibility. And it's kind of like not only are you trying to reach some state that you'll never actually reach, a destination you'll never actually reach, but it's kind of like we're doing it and we're running through sand at the same time because there's just so much friction and it's just so much harder than it needs to be. And oftentimes we don't realize it's because of things we're doing within ourselves because they're unconscious and sometimes subconscious as well. So I would love to, I'm not particularly great at watching the chat at the same time. So Teresa or Sarah, if you see anything I should see, please let me know. But otherwise, I definitely will answer any questions at the end. So ultimately, what I created was the Dash Freedom Framework. And so there are 4 steps. I'm not going to get into them to the degree I would love to today because we have a short time, but I just want to talk to each of these at a very high level today and give you some really high level questions to ask yourself. And there won't be adequate time for you to really respond to those questions today, but I'd love for you to take screenshots and really take some time to self-reflect at some point, hopefully soon after the call, and really ask these questions of yourself. So the first step is disrupting the default, and then acknowledge where you are and what you want, see through the noise, and then honor who you truly are and who you want to be. So we'll go through each of those. So disrupt the default. What comes to mind when I think about that is just being on a roundabout. And I often think about the scene from European Vacation where they're stuck on the roundabout. That's kind of how the human brain works. We are often operating on default. And so the first step is really disrupting that. So I encourage you to be a default detector or detective, whatever word you want to use, and really think about, okay, when am I operating on default? Because we just do it. We don't realize we're doing it, but we just do. And truly, if we weren't operating on default to some degree, our brains would explode. If we had to think about every time we needed to turn on our turning signal or every time we had to open a door, if we had to think about what that looked like, we just wouldn't be able to function as humans. So we need to operate on default to some degree, but oftentimes we're doing it in a way that doesn't serve us. So be a default detective and recognize that you may be operating on default when you're doing some of these things. When you're speeding up, you find yourself speeding up and thinking, oh, I just need to do more. I just need to work faster. You find yourself tightening up. Oftentimes, we don't even realize this is happening because we're just so accustomed to it. And we're surrounded by other people who have the same thing happening. We just feel like, oh, of course, my back hurts. I'm an adult. This is what adulthood looks like. We find ourselves replaying a conversation, trying to fix things. So we can really figure out what our default is when we take some time to really investigate. So I invite you to pause, which I know is really easy to say, harder to actually do. So this is something I would love for you to do. This is an action. It's pausing. So stop doing what you're doing. Get curious and really get curious with yourself. And that's the starting point. And then you can get curious about other people too. So really investigate what's underneath your responses, not just focusing on what do I do next? What's the next step I need to take? But what's underneath? What's driving that? So I like to use this picture of a glacier because I think it's, again, this visual is just really helpful. So if we think about a glacier and the fact that there's, a very small tip top to the glacier, and then there's this gigantic portion underneath, our actions and results are the very top of the glacier. And that's where we tend to focus. We focus on what we can do more of, the next step we can take. And our actions lead to a particular result. That's what we can see. And that's often conscious to some degree, right? But we think, oh, I just need to do this. I need to be more disciplined. I need to have more willpower. I need to just get up at 5 a.m. every day and buy a new time management system. That's going to change everything. But what's really underneath the surface is what's driving our actions, and our actions lead to our results. So we have all of these beliefs, some of which were inherited from others we don't even recognize we have. We have assumptions. We have our nervous system that just reacts automatically a lot of the time, societal norms, expectations, and then ultimately we have the meaning that we're giving each of these things. And those are our stories. We believe our stories to be true. To ourselves, we make complete sense. We think, well, of course I need to work over the weekend. Of course I can't go to bed until my to-do list is done. It seems so rational to us because we have all of this stuff underneath driving our actions. And what I'd love for you to think about is the fact that we all make sense to ourselves. We find other people confusing, just like other people find us equally confusing. I remember back when, I thought I should be able to get my to-do list done when I was still young and thought things went according to plan. My husband would often just say, just sit down, just take a seat. Because from his perspective, based on everything underneath the surface of his own glacier, he just thought that was, what needed to happen and that would be relaxing. To me, it was the exact opposite. And I wanted to crawl out of my skin. So just know that you make as much sense to other people as they make to you. And oftentimes we question ourselves too. And we think, why am I doing this? But it's because of everything unconscious below the surface. So ask yourself, what am I pulled to do right now? So pause, get curious, look below the surface. and ask yourself, what am I being pulled to do right now? And oftentimes it feels like a compulsion, as if we don't actually even have a choice. And it doesn't feel like a choice because we're not aware of what's driving it. We don't even know what's there. So what am I being pulled to do right now? What is driving that? What's the story behind it? Now, for me, I had a story that I should be able to get it all done. No one specifically ever actually told me that, but it was something I had running below the surface, kind of like um, a cassette tape. If any of you know what a cassette tape is anymore, but it's like playing in the background saying you should be able to get it all done. You should be able to get it all done. And I also had a cassette tape playing that said that there was never enough time. So it was almost conflicting, but I thought, even though I didn't have enough time, I should be able to get it done. So that was one of the stories that was driving me. You might have some of the same. And is this truly reducing friction when I take this particular action? Is it truly reducing the friction? Or am I just repeating a familiar pattern that has always been running in the background? Because our brains like to do what's familiar, not necessarily what's in our best interest, but our brains like familiar because our brain ultimately wants to keep us alive. So I'd love for you to think about the fact that we do have superpowers. We have within our control to have certain superpowers, and understanding is one of the biggest superpowers that we can possibly have. We can gain that understanding when we pause, when we stop and reflect, and we think about, okay, what's under the surface? And I encourage you to really think about that for yourself. And then once you do that for yourself, you're better able to understand other people as well. So starting with yourself, that's the starting point. And then realizing that understanding yourself is the ultimate superpower. And then you're able to understand others as well. Okay, the next step is acknowledging where you are and where you truly want to be. Where are you and what do you want? So another encourager to slow down and consider without judgment. What do I actually know to be true? And what do I truly want? So for me, I knew, again, at a cognitive level, when I really thought about it, that I'd never actually be able to get my to-do list done unless I did laundry naked one day, right? Then I'd never even have laundry done because then the clothes you're wearing are dirty, right? So really slow down to maybe even an annoying degree, and think about, okay, what do I actually know to be true? And it's going to take a lot of patience with yourself because it's going to feel wildly uncomfortable. And I often think about this scene. It's my favorite scene from Zootopia where the sloth is working at the license place. And it's so uncomfortable and so funny because it's just painful to watch this sloth. That's what I encourage you to do. Just slow down at least for a while to be sloth-like and really ask yourself, what do I actually know to be true? I knew that I wasn't actually going to lose my job if I didn't work over the weekend. I wasn't actually going to have everyone in the company against me if I didn't get something done. But at certain moments, because I was being driven by my default, it felt like, well, that's absolutely true. I had these cassette tapes playing in the background. But when you really think about what do you actually know to be true and what do you want, then you can actually do something with that information. I knew that what I truly wanted was more time with my family. I knew I truly wanted more sleep. I just didn't know how to get it. Okay, next step is seeing through the noise. And so ask yourself, because we have all of this noise all the time, the noise of our cassette tapes playing, we have all these distractions by, all of the social media, all these people wanting things from us, all this stuff. Life is a little noisy just in general. I encourage you to ask yourself, who am I when I'm at my best? I knew, again, at a cognitive level, that when I didn't get much sleep, I was not truly functioning at my best. But again, I just felt this compulsion to stay up late, try to get everything done, try to reach the horizon. And I was not operating at my best. I just didn't know what to do instead. So really stopping and asking yourself, who am when I'm truly at my best, what does that look like? And really having an understanding of that and giving yourself some time to think that through is really powerful. Also asking yourself, what do I value most? So I always valued crossing things off my list. Oh, there's just, maybe you're one of those people like me where you have something done, but you'll put it on your list just for the satisfaction of crossing it off. Like you already finished it, but it was never on the list to begin with, and you just wanted that satisfaction. I loved that feeling. I still do. And by the way, I'm not cured of any of this. It's just easier for me now. But just asking myself, okay, what do I value most? So when I thought about who I truly wanted to be and who I was when I was operating at my best, it helps me think about, okay, what do I really want most? Do I want to operate at my best? Do I want to get more sleep, or do I want the satisfaction of crossing that one thing off of my list? Because like my therapist said, I'm never actually going to get it all done anyway. And then also thinking about, what can I actually control? So often we feel like we can control everything. We want to be able to control everything a lot of times. What people think of us, how happy we're making people, the project deadline, all of these things. Some things we can influence, but we can't necessarily control. And when we really step back and ask ourselves that question about what we can actually control, that can be really powerful. And then finally, the final step is honor who you truly are and want to be. So, what's unique about you? What's the brilliance you bring? And how can you honor that? So, I realize we can't hear each other here, but I would love for you to fill in the blank and say this with me out loud. And if you're in a space where it's going to be weird, don't. You just say it in your head. But if you're going to get a lot of stares, don't worry about it. But I blank, Sheri, clearly that's my name, give myself permission to pause before reacting, question the story I'm telling myself, and choose a response that creates more freedom rather than friction. So for me, I kind of felt like I was in this trap, and I didn't know who specifically had put me in this trap. But when I realized that I was the only one who could unlock it, it became very empowering, and that gave me a sense of freedom. I still get in the trap here and there, don't get me wrong, but it really is up to each of us to choose our response. We're the only ones who can give ourselves permission to pause and to question the stories that we've been telling ourselves. So again, here's the framework. Disrupt the default. That's the first step. Recognizing you're even operating on default. Acknowledging where you are and what you want. Seeing through the noise, and honoring who you truly are and who you want to be. And I'm happy to come back to some of these slides too, so you can get a screenshot and ask yourself some of those specific questions. So once you recognize the pattern that has been driving your actions, has been driving your behaviors and your results, that's when you have the possibility of choice. Because when we don't even know those patterns exist and that is how we've been operating, it feels like we don't have a choice. But you do have a choice. It just takes recognizing that pattern first. And it's not just this or this. There are ultimately lots of possibilities and lots of choices, but we need to know our starting point, and we need to know where we are first. Just like if you're going to go to, the Mall of America, you need to know, okay, what's my starting point? Where am I starting? That's how you get to the final destination. So my final question for you is, who do you want to be? I knew that I did not want to continue operating the way I was. I knew that was just leading to burnout. That was going to be the end. And I wanted to have a more sustainable approach to a life that was more fulfilling and a life that I ultimately enjoyed. I wanted to be someone different for the people around me because, hard work and the behavior you're modeling for other people, we can tell people, oh, don't do what I do what I say, not what I do, right? But ultimately, people are watching us, and we are impacting people in some way when we're exhausting ourselves. it's going to be exhausting to others as well. I knew I didn't want to be that person. So ask yourself, who do you ultimately want to be? Not necessarily what action do you want to take and what do you want to do next, but who do you want to be? And so thank you very much for your time. This is my website. I'm on LinkedIn and I would love to connect. I love to hear people's stories. And I also have a podcast called the Dash Mindset Podcast. So if you have any interest in potentially working with me or want to know how I can work with you one-on-one or with your organization, please reach out to Teresa. But I would love to connect and have you listen to my podcast. So, that's it for my slides. So what questions do you have for me?
Thank you, Sheri. Yeah, if you have any questions for Sheri, please drop them in the chat box and we'll take a couple minutes to look through those. I'm trying to get all my things together. There will be a poll that just popped up on your screen. If you would take a couple minutes to just answer those quick questions for us and give us some feedback on today's presentation with Sheri. I don't see any questions here, but thank you for your insights, Sheri. And this one comment on the chat, I really like. I kind of chuckled to myself when you said it. I've had anxiety since I came out of the womb. So relatable to so many people. It's great.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Christine, and also not because it's exhausting, right?
Yeah, right. Mary here is asking, can you repeat the once you recognize the pattern you create?
Oh,
Blank,
yes,
blank.
absolutely. Let me go back to that slide. I'm not sure why I'm struggling with slides today. I think this is what you're asking, Mary. Once you recognize the pattern, that's when you can make a choice. Because when we're driven by our patterns are what causes us to behave a particular way. And when we don't recognize that we have a pattern that's driving our behavior, it feels like we don't have a choice. It feels like, oh, I just need to keep working, 70-hour weeks. I need to work until 2 o'clock in the morning. Whatever it is for you, it feels like you don't have a choice in it because our pattern is what's driving everything. It's everything underneath the surface that we can't see. So when we recognize that we have a pattern driving everything we're doing, that's when we can actually create the possibility of choice. I think that's what you're referring to, Mary, but I'd love to know if you're referring to something else. I'm happy to go back to any slides that have questions on them for you to take a screenshot too.
Here's another question for you, Sheri. What is the best way to practice this when you're put on the spot by others who have an expectation of immediate response?
Oh my gosh. Well, what we generally want to do is just respond and say, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll get that to you right away. Right. I suspect that's the case for you too. It takes an incredible amount of courage to actually stop and realize that the way we immediately want to respond isn't necessarily going to serve us. And it oftentimes isn't going to serve the person who wants an immediate response either. And I know it has taken me a lot of time to get comfortable with pausing and not immediately responding, even when someone wants an immediate response. Because there were times early in my career when I was, somebody wanted something done right away. And I would just think, well, I have to do that. If I don't, then it's going to appear like I'm not working hard enough. I don't have it figured out. I'm not a team player, right? All these stories I was telling myself. But there were times when I was trying to get all of these urgent needs met, and I was doing it without much sleep and without much enthusiasm for sure, which wasn't ultimately in someone's best interest. And so I realized that it actually is more helpful for the other person if I pause and really take the time to question it for myself and ask questions of them too, because oftentimes, I mean, generally speaking, we all think our own stuff is urgent. So what I learned to do was to ask, okay, so by when specifically do you need this? And, what are you ultimately trying to achieve? Again, it depends upon the situation, but oftentimes people would say, oh, well, I just said I needed it within the next 5 minutes because, it was on my mind, but I don't really need it until next Wednesday. Or they would think they would actually sometimes even think, oh, well, why do I actually need this? But it was so urgent in their mind because, whatever's on our mind seems urgent to us, right? So, I think the first step is realizing that immediately responding to someone, although a lot of times it feels necessary in the moment, it might not actually be in the other person's best interest either. That was a really long-winded response. So I hope I ultimately answered your question.
So we have one more. Mary did say thank you for repeating the last question about the pattern you create. So that got that one. But here's a new one from Brianna. What if your default is the do it yourself, but it is because you really can't rely on your coworkers or partner to do those tasks? How do you get out of default so that they don't take advantage?
Well, one thing that I try to remind myself of, and also I want to be clear that I don't have this all figured out. There are definitely times when, my 12-year-old isn't cleaning the kitchen to to my standards, and I'll just think, okay, fine, I'll just do it. But something I do step back and think about a lot of the time is the fact that if I do just step in and do it, one of the results of that is resentment. And I'm going to build resentment toward, I'll just continue with my son as the example. I'm going to start to resent him, but it's ultimately my choice to step in. So there are a lot of questions that we need to ask ourselves in those situations. One is, okay, what's the story that's leading me to believe that I do need to take care of it? Sometimes it's because we have such a high standard, it might just not be possible for someone else to meet our standard. So is that truly it? Is it that, we're setting an expectation that someone actually can't meet? And so we're taking it on ourselves as a result when the expectation might just be too high? Is it that our expectation could truly actually be lowered a little bit? Does it really need to be done to the degree we think it needs to be done? I ask myself too, okay, is there a reason why someone isn't meeting this expectation? Is it because I haven't explained it well? Is it because they truly don't see the value in it? Maybe they don't understand how it's going to benefit them. I mean, okay, back to my 12-year-old, he doesn't see the value in wiping the kitchen counter, right? He never will. Maybe, I hope, when he has his own place someday. um, but so sometimes I think, okay, if I truly want that done to my standards, I do just have to do it because he's just never going to value it. He's never going to meet my expectation. Some days I realize, okay, it's not that big of a deal. And I really don't have to do it. So there are a lot of questions that I encourage you to continue asking yourself. And it truly is a situation by situation basis. And, I used to really get frustrated when my husband didn't fold towels a certain way when we first got married. We've been married for almost 26 years. So I'm figuring out that this is just the way he folds towels. It takes some time sometimes. But I realized, okay, ultimately, what do I want? I just want the towels put away. I want them put away. I don't want them to be in a big, just pile or just ridiculous pile in there. I want them to be folded and I want them to be put away. So I had to realize that, okay, my expectation just is too high and it's unreasonable. So ultimately thinking about what I ultimately want is really helpful too. That was a really long response, so hopefully that was helpful.
Well, we don't have any more questions. So Brianna says thank you so
Oh,
much.
good.
That helps. So good long-winded answer. So thank you everyone for hanging out with us today a little bit longer, but Sheri brings some great thoughts and new ways to work our lives a little bit better. So if you want more information on Sheri's presentation, or to connect with Sheri, you can certainly reach out to me or any of us here at BCS, and we can make that connection for you. Our next webinar will be on June 15th with Honor Jensen on managing the fixer, how to build accountability instead of dependence. And there will be a link to register for that webinar in a follow-up email that you will receive later this week. So again, thank you, Sheri. Thank you for everybody today for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.